I'm not personally disliked by the industry, but I'm professionally hated because, I keep on telling them, you're charging too much, you're ripping people off. They're all very nice people as individuals. So you've got to be prepared to be a little bit of a loner.
Yeah.
And what's that?
Yeah, what's that like?
Oh, I love it.
Welcome to Checks and Balances, brought to you by Partners Life. I'm Michael Vincent. This is James Blair. And today we've got Sam Stubbs, founder of Simplicity, here to tell us his story.
Sam, welcome to the podcast.
G'day. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming along. Really excited to hear your story. There's probably quite a lot to go through. And then we're also going to do a second episode where Sam tells us all about his thoughts around where New Zealand is going and Simplicity's role in it, because there's a lot to go through. But Sam, this episode is about you and probably wherever else we take it as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
I think you're most well known for your work around Simplicity, low cost investing when it comes to KiwiSaver and changing the market. But when I think, growing the largest New Zealand low cost KiwiSaver fund, you probably don't assume the background that you have. Tell us a little bit about your background before Simplicity in your career.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Because I'm an old guy, right? So I've done a bit, right? So look, I'm a West Auckland kid, right? So I grew up in Sunnyvale.
Yeah.
And back then that was real West Auckland. Like, these, I don't know if you know that show Outrageous Fortune.
Oh yeah.
They're in Te Atatu. That's posh West Auckland, right? So mine was a real one. And so I had I chose my parents really well, right? You make one decision in life, choose them well. And so they were both school teachers, primary and secondary school teachers. So, there was always enough money, but there was never too much. There was always, New Zealand was a very aspirational place then. I could grow up in West Auckland and expect to own a house, expect to get a good job, expect that the school was okay and the hospitals were free and all that sort of stuff. So I think it was a very cool life in that regard, that you had, reasonable ambition, and but it was also pretty tough. Like, I wouldn't have wanted to be a woman back then.
Yeah.
Way more misogynist and so on, and way more racist, actually. It was interesting what you could say and what was said at school.
Yeah.
And then I had aspirations. I thought I could do anything, right? Because you were told back then you can do anything, right? So I go to university and study, and then go overseas and, make it overseas, like typical OE, and I just had a very lucky career. I think Kiwis massively underestimate how good they can make it overseas, purely by virtue of their ability to get on with people and be likable, and, they've got a cute accent. And no one can pinhole New Zealand. Everyone, so the social mobility you have, like in England, I was like hanging out with lords and hanging out with dustmen equally, that's a huge competitive advantage. And then I had a really lucky career in investment banking, and I just saw a lot. Like, it was like just amazing shit, private jets and all that. In fact, we were just talking about the Rolling Stones beforehand. I had one trip on the Rolling Stones jet, and we had to hire it because we were floating this Chinese company, which was so big that the party going around raising capital was over 100 people. So we had to charter the biggest possible private jet, and it happened to be owned by the Rolling Stones. So was in there, sitting there, and it was in there like literally golden bathroom.
Yeah.
They had a gold shower and gold taps, and I'm sitting there thinking, shit, this is pretty good for a kid from West Auckland.
For Sunnyvale, so you're like, man, this is,
And I'm sitting down there, and then there's the deputy chairman of China Mobile, which is one of the most senior people in China, was reading my palm,
Yeah.
And I was just thinking that this is, so I had a lot of surreal stuff happening then.
Yeah. Really
cool. And so you sort of get the impression, when that happens in your life, then you think, oh shit, I can do anything then, right? So, and then I came back here, and because we had kids and wanted to bring them up in New Zealand, and then just worked in corporate New Zealand for a little while. I actually retired. I've actually retired twice and failed both times.
How long did that last?
Yeah,
not long, mate. The first time was about 4 or 5 months. The next one was a year. Maybe the next one will be 2 years. But I'm just not hardwired for leisure.
Yeah,
So, or at least I think you can blend it, right? All my holidays are called Walla days. You work a bit. So Came back and then kind of had a midlife crisis. I sort of looked in the mirror and I actually didn't like the guy I'd become. And I sort of thought, I'm so far away from Seymour Road in Sunnyvale, which I grew up, and I'm just making myself and a few other people around me wealthier. And the more money I get, the less I'm enjoying it.
Yeah.
So a real hedonistic treadmill.
Mm.
And so I just stopped working. Second time retired, went and planted trees and did a bit of volunteer work and just hung out. And then I sort of had a moment really. It was actually probably my partner, Amanda, who really was the catalyst for it, where I sort of thought, well, let's get into giving back. And when I started doing that, I actually found that, like, I'm just pissed off I didn't discover it 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But and it was deeply satisfying. So using all of those skills, becoming kind of like a gamekeeper turned poacher.
Yeah.
Said, okay, so all of the stuff I know about the finance industry, because I've been donkey deep in it for decades, I'm going to turn it all around now, and I'm not going to make it so that it makes the people in the industry wealthier. Finance industry is great at making people rich. I'm going to turn it all around, and we're not going to take anything, and we're going to give it all back, and use that as a competitive advantage, right?
Before we jump into that, Sam, it's very interesting what you just said. I want to talk a bit more about the not liking the guy that you saw in the mirror piece. I mean, I'm just keen to dig a little bit deeper. Is that, like, obviously a lot of us in the Instagram age, very materialistic, focused on money. Is that what you're referencing? Or what?
Yeah. Look, I was very addicted to money, right? Because when you work in when you grow up in the place I grew up, like, a little bit of money is a big deal, right? And like, there was never a Mercedes or BMW on my street, right? And so when I saw them, I don't know what it was about ambition, but I was born with it. And I said, I want that. And that became the hallmark of success, right? Stuff, right? And accoutrements. And then what happens is you get this stuff, and then it's just a little bit unsatisfying. Like, it's cool the first day, like there's a dopamine hit, and I've had it all, mate, just fancy cars and boats and all that sort of shit and houses, but every single time you get something, it's a little bit less satisfying than it was beforehand, and then you find yourself, it's kind of like pardon the French, it's like a dick measuring contest.
Yeah.
You start hanging around with people who've got this, and then, you do this and you do this, and that it just becomes unsatisfying. And I think it's okay if you grow up in a place where that's all you ever knew. But what I knew was that the people who used to live next to us, they slid down the path of life just because the dad lost his job. And then suddenly they were dirt poor, and I could see that. And so I could never forget that. And also I think having my parents grounded in teaching in West Auckland schools, they were, and I got to see the life that they had, which was much less materialistic, but much more satisfying in terms of just giving back. Teachers are heroes to me. So I could never escape it. And I'll tell you the other thing you do, you insulate yourself. Like, when you get money, that's why they have gated communities. You start living around other people who aren't poor. You don't want to see it because it's confrontational if you do. And if you do, you just dip in, then you dip straight back out again and get to your comfort zone. So I don't know what it was, guys. I can't, but I just thought, fuck it. I'm not doing this anymore. If I've been gifted this knowledge and the ability and the energy and whatever to make a difference, I'm not going to die wondering if I could.
Yeah.
It's funny you say that, because when we're doing financial plans for clients and clients get to the point where they are financially free, it leads to some very tough conversations around what very, I guess, philosophical around what the hell's the purpose, what's your purpose, all of those sort of things, right? And some people default to more because the other conversation with yourself is far more complicated.
You're absolutely right, eh? And it is a tough conversation. I think that, one part of me actually, in my next endeavor, one of them almost wants to try and get those people together in a safe place and say, hey, listen, you have these incredible resources. You could make an amazing difference. And I just want to give you myself as an example of, it feels awesome. It feels much better. So giving is way better than receiving. It's just that I get how you feel as if you need to protect yourself and look after your family and do all that. But then there are a lot of people later in life who have the resources and who have the ability, but they just don't know how.
Yeah.
Or it's just unusual to do it that way. And then you don't have to like cash everything in, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's not as if it's an all or nothing. I mean, we live in this world where the messages are either, the heroes are the people who give up everything, take massive risks, and win. Well, any rational animal think, no, I don't want to take massive risks. I've spent my life building this, but I want to do something. So finding an outlet. I find rich people, and, I hang out with a fair share of them. By and large, I'm surprised by how scared they are. And they won't admit it to themselves, but they're scared of poverty, scared of irrelevance, scared of all those sort of things. And so they wrap themselves in layers of protection. And so most of them have far more money than they need, but they feel like they need more.
When you say scared, is that because a lot of these people have come from nothing and scared to go back from it, or you think that's their identity? Or
I don't know. I don't know that I can define it, but all I know is that I can look from the outside and say, hey, I know how you feel because I used to feel this way. I'm doing it a little bit different. I mean, I'm not, in poverty, but you sort of, and, maybe I'm just a little bit up myself in this regard, but I sort of think, you have no idea how much better. I know you feel good. I know you feel so, but I sense that there's a fear of you doing what you would really like to do, which is actually not fishing and not drinking good wines and all that sort of stuff. You want to do some of that, but the feeling is if your life could stand for something more and you could have some purpose and drive an outcome, which would be great for people that you don't know, not your immediate family and friends. But that involves risk, and if you grew up in a world where you say, listen, get enough money and you can de-risk your life and just start enjoying yourself, right? This is sort of like we seem to have defaulted to sort of like the American dream, which is if you open a magazine, you've got to work really hard, but then when you get rich, you can start enjoying yourself.
Yeah.
And that's all beach resorts and boats and all that sort of thing. But life's not like that. And most people who work really hard to make that money, they get bored. Like leisure can actually be quite boring. So having a purpose, and we make family and friends, that's a great purpose to have in life. But a whole lot of people have got a whole lot more bandwidth to do a whole lot more than that as well. And I just, it's interesting, and I know we're not talking about simplicity yet, but it's interesting, we have 65 volunteers. Every single person I ask to help out is happy to help.
Yeah.
So I think there's a hell of a lot of good in people. You just have to find the way to release it in a way that they're comfortable.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to involve a massive amount of risk.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to give. I mean, people are basically nice, lovely people. There are very few, genuine wankers in the world.
Yeah, two of the three of us are great guys here.
I think the interesting point there is kind of one of the ones around kind of a sense of purpose, but then your relevancy in society and your life as well. And you kind of, we talk about it a bit where we see people who kind of perhaps have the money, don't have the purpose, not drifting, I guess, but they start to feel the relevancy fading, right? Because maybe they're not a leader of an industry anymore. Or they're not a head of a company, or not, and that I think raises some really big personal questions around what do they want out of their life. And actually, now that I've put aside my professional purpose, what is the actual purpose of my life?
Yeah, it's you're absolutely right, eh? And it doesn't have to be like, you can just give in so many ways, right? You've seen a lot of successful business owners, right? There are just wonderful employers and people who create massive loyalty. And yes, they may get rich in the process, but they're actually fundamentally not doing it to make the money. The richest people I know don't work to make money. Richest people I know work to build awesome institutions, businesses, environments, whatever it is. They're
passionate about what they're doing.
Yeah, the money just comes along, right?
Yeah,
the money is the consequence of it, not the cause of it. And so you don't have to sell anything or give up something and then go and work as a
live in the hills. Yeah.
You can build great institutions that, and so as long as you have that mindset that this is actually, what we're doing here is building something wonderful, rather than I'm doing it because I want to make money. And most of those suffer and fail. So it's not, and you know, I was only talking about a particular point in life, right? You know, like if you, like, you know, I have 4 kids, you know, when you're working and you've got kids and family and all that sort of stuff, you haven't got too much time for this. I want to change the world, you know, bandwidth. It's only later on in life when, you know, you have this window opens up, and it's just that you get so used to operating in the here and now and just dealing with the daily grind of life and getting on with it. And then suddenly you have this money and suddenly you have this time, and you go, oh, well, what now?
Yeah.
You know, and grandkids can come along, and, you know, but these people don't realize how they can change the world, like how incredibly well equipped they are to make a massive difference.
Yeah. And I think like the listeners, a lot of those are those that you talked about, right? Kids running around, busy jobs, dealing with cost of living, 7% interest rates on their mortgage, all of those sort of things. But so much of it's around purpose. Your purpose now, a lot of the people will be building towards something bigger. Will have means in the future. And what you do with those means. I want to. So you looked in the mirror. You were like, I want to change. You've got this really cool purpose that you've been able to articulate. So that's the purpose around simplicity. That's like the trigger. Tell us a bit more about the simplicity story. Where did you go from there? Before we move on, we talk all the time about planning and growing our wealth, but protecting that wealth is just as important. That's why having the right insurance in place can help when life goes unexpectedly.
And that's why this episode is brought to you by Partners Life, a New Zealand-operated, award-winning insurance provider with over 300,000 Kiwis insured and 89% of claims paid.
Partners Life understand that having some insurance is better than having no insurance. They have flexible and personalized solutions for any budget or situation.
Check out their website in our show notes below.
Yeah, look, I had a long think about what should I be doing here, right? And so I spent a lot of time navel gazing and planting native trees on Motatapu Island. And I thought that I was going to plant a valley of those, and that would be my mark on the world. Now, after a while, and a bloody sore back, I thought, no, I'm a bit of a labourer here. It says, why aren't I using what I already know?
Yeah.
And so that's a gamekeeper turned poacher type thing, right? So I think that in the process of giving back is, you know, just do what you know, like, you know, do what you're good at, right? And just do it for a slightly different reason.
Yeah.
Right. So so I decided, okay, well, we've got these skills. And the second thing I worked out is I don't want to do it myself. So I got together with some mates, my partner, Amanda, and 2 friends, and blank sheet of paper. And we said, okay, well, we know what we know. How would we turn this round? And by the way, the other thing too is, you know, remember that, you know, most people who've been successful in life have made risk-adjusted decisions, right? They don't put it all on, you know, 10 red at the casino, right? So we said, okay, well, blank sheet of paper, but what do we know, and where do we know the margin is, and where do we know the competitive advantage is? And so and has this worked overseas? Yes, just bring it to New Zealand.
Yeah. So what year is this where you've got the blank?
This is 8 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're in 2016.
Yeah.
Tell us about you know, all of us, you know, KiwiSaver balances are much larger. There's a lot more competition, a lot of focus on low fees.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about what you recall from the environment at the time.
It was the dark ages back then.
The Wild West.
Well, everything was controlled by the banks.
Yeah.
There were very few competitors. I think it'd be 1 or 2 people had set up businesses, which, you know, Milford and Carmel Fisher and so on. But there were 1 or 2 examples, but they were not big in the scheme of things. And everything was paper-based. You know, you still had to go in and fill in a form and you know, for KiwiSaver. So it was all pretty antiquated, right? So what we worked out was we had to create the first online KiwiSaver, basically, the first one that you could do. So that involved 2 years of coffees and meetings with officials, just to get them to change the rules to allow you to sign up online. It's amazing how slow
that is wild.
I know, it's
just
insane. So we are. I mean, I don't claim credit for much, but we are the people who, you know, push that. It was a lot of hard work.
Yeah.
But, you know, they wanted to do it, but, you know, these things take a long time. So, so that's how we started. And we just said, look, we're just going to do it cheaper, much cheaper, because the thing we identified was just the fees were very high. So we said, okay, we'll do it online. We'll do it low cost, passive and all that. And it's morphed since then, you know. So when you do something, I think, well, you earn the right for opportunities to knock on your door, and you get the optionality to do different things, right? So that's sort of how it happened. And it's interesting, like when you grew up in West Auckland, right? It's a bit of a scrap, right? I was at Kelston Boys, right? And I was a thin white boy with some huge boys around me. Bit of the law of the jungle. And then I grew up with my mum, and my mum's a funny character. She, you're so shaped by your parents and you don't even realize it. My mum was a primary school teacher. She was never afraid to speak truth to power. She'd always stand up for the kids. So she'd always take on the parents who were doing something wrong, or the Ministry of Education. She'd speak her mind and fight for the kids. She's a hugely popular teacher. But she also gave me this sort of this fearless, and so I sort of, now, I had the money to fail, so I could afford to fail. But I got from my mum, I said, look, we're just going to take on the whole damn industry here because people are getting ripped off. I'm going to fight for the little guy here. And so I got that from her, I think. And so that was just the mentality, right? And I think that, when you read all these great biographies of these entrepreneurs, they've got balls of, I don't have Richard Branson's level of chutzpah and risk appetite, but you've just got to be prepared to take it on, right? And if you're going to disrupt the status quo, you've got to be prepared to be blind to all of those messages that you're going to get from the status quo that what you're doing ain't going to work, right? You have to have just blind ambition and just a blind belief and you've got to believe in yourself. So it's a time in life when you actually question yourself the most, but also believe in yourself the most. And it takes guts, eh? I'm not personally disliked by the industry, but I'm professionally hated because, I keep on telling them, you're charging too much, you're ripping people off. They're all very nice people as individuals, but so you've got to be prepared to be a little bit of a loner.
Yeah.
And what's that?
Yeah, what's that like?
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
But if you go back to like Simplicity's managing like billions of dollars now, you're doing a whole bunch of different things.
Yeah.
But that time at the start, so that online application form taking 2 years.
Like crazy.
Working
Insane.
for a bank.
We
thinking
get
of
it.
government,
We get it.
thinking of councils does not
Right.
surprise me. The bank we worked for, I remember just trying to get the managed fund onto online banking was, the joke was it's going to arrive at Christmas, but we didn't know which Christmas it would arrive. And I think it was like 2018. It finally got online. And people crazy, right? You can see your money online, and that was a huge win for the bank at that time. But going back to that point where you're trying to disrupt an industry, you're going, we've got to keep going. We're making a difference.
Yeah.
Like you must have just, you are cutting other people's lunches. There must have been a huge amount of pushback and
pressure,
challenges along the way.
It's interesting, so when New Zealand's a funny place. When they don't like what you're doing, they're just silent, right?
Yeah.
As if anyone was ever slagging us off, but there's just no one saying, hey, we're doing a great thing. Or every now and again you'd see and they say, oh, isn't it lovely what you're doing? Just thinking, oh, this is going to be a small guy.
Flash in the pan,
whatever. Just being nice and so on. So, and it's never personal, right? These are lovely people, they're really nice people. It's just ever about the business model. So, and then, it's, I hear what people say when I'm not in the room, and it's amusing, because it always anchors back to the philosophy of fear. Most people in our industry are fearful. Actually, they stick with organisations because that's a safe place, or one part of them is fearful. And so, I hear lovely things like, he's pulling the wool over his eyes. He's going to pull $50 million out of this without anybody knowing what's his game, as if money was the motivator, right? And or anyway. There's a whole lot of things they say, but that's fine. I understand where that's coming from. That's because I'm and the people at Simplicity. We want to cut you a lunch. Like we want you to make less money.
We're out for it. Yeah.
Yeah, we want you to make less money. That is not a nice.
Yeah.
No one wants anyone like that in their life.
Yeah.
Right? So I understand that. I completely understand what the motivations are, and they're not personal, and so, but that's okay. That's what happens with disruption all the time, right?
Yeah.
Someone comes along and
So apart from
changes it.
just cutting the margins, getting lower fees, the other big part is the 15% that you focus on giving away to charities.
Yeah.
Why is that so important to you?
Well, once again, it's where I grew up, right? So there are a lot of people who were looked after by charities one way or another on my street. I can remember very early on the Salvation Army, and I can remember some people going to the City Mission, and at that time we were building, helping build the John Waititi Marae, the Hono Waititi Marae, which was, and my mum, I mean, God bless her, like she's this girl from England, and there she was weaving tuku panels and running car auctions down at Henderson Square to raise money for the marae. So I think that when you're around that, you have an appreciation for the fact that charity does a lot, and a little bit of money can make a massive amount of difference. So we decided to build that in, and I decided to do it because it just felt right. I cannot tell you that there was anything other than why don't we do this and give part of it to charity? I did think at the time, I said that will be a competitive differentiator over time, and it has been.
Yeah.
And I did also think, look, a little bit of money from a lot of money could be a lot, right? And so it's now, over $2.5 million a year now.
Awesome.
And it's adding up as we grow. The other thing I thought, though, it's interesting actually, I did think this at the time, and I didn't realize how powerful it would be. It's that if you starve an organization of assets, it's amazing how lean you can run a business. So I thought we will actually be a better business for taking 15% away, and we'll have to run on 85%. And it's amazing that lean mentality, how powerful that is. And also, it's a massive motivator for volunteers. I didn't realize how powerful it would be. I genuinely just thought it would be a good idea. It's turned out to be a major competitive differentiator.
Yeah.
Because we get because we say, look, every time we ask for something, we say, look, we're a charity that owns a nonprofit. No one's making any money here. And so you get given, I'm not going to mention names, but you would not believe the number of people who help us in their own way. And all they ever do is ask for 1% of their time or one particular favor in one particular area. And because it's them asking for it or them making it happen, and sometimes we have our legal counsel who works for a law firm. She'll be embarrassed if I mention her name, but it's amazing, just incredible how generous and wonderful she's been. And so it's turned out to be a really big competitive differentiator. But I didn't think it would be that.
Yeah.
And actually, that's an interesting insight to business generally. We're moving into a world now where everything is more and more tech-based, right? Tech, funnily enough, doesn't need a lot of capital. I mean, at the startup phase, I was probably losing about $20,000 a month in salaries and costs. But actually, simplicity was never more than $500,000 in the red.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing, really, eh? And so tech businesses don't need much capital. If that's the case, that means it's going to become much easier to compete, right? The barriers to entry in a whole lot of industries, if you don't have to build a factory, the barriers to entry, if they're tech barriers, are really people-based barriers, right?
Yeah.
So it's like people matter so much more now. When you're building a steel mill, it didn't really matter about the quality of the guy as long as he could lift steel, right? Now, if you're in a tech-based business and a services-based business, the quality of the people you have is massive. And people have great hearts, most people. So if you are running a business as a charity, you have actually amazing competitive advantage because you will get the very best people who part of that really turns them on, right?
Yeah.
And so our team love the fact that we're giving away this money, and so we attract, I think, better people. They stay around for longer. They work harder. So I think it's an incredible competitive advantage. In fact, I think modern capitalism is going to change, and that unless you have an organization purpose-driven, and also if it's a tech business, it can be non-profit as well. Look, I'll give you an example. 2 examples I use. First of all, is look at Southern Cross. Southern Cross is a non-profit owned by a charity. We modelled ourselves on it. They have 75% market share of the medical insurance market 75 years later. It's a massive competitive advantage because they can always underprice their competitors because they don't have to make a profit, right? Here's the other example. The next Apple, I think the next mega giga corporation, not by virtue of being listed and profit, but in terms of its impact on the world, is probably going to be a social enterprise. I don't know where it will come from and what it will do, but it will be involved in your life in an area where they don't want to or have to make money. They just have to make enough money to run the business, but there will be an unbelievable social purpose behind it. And so capitalism is going to change. And I know I sound like a zealot. I know I sound like I should have a dog collar on and I'm standing on a pulpit here, but man, I can see it because we're experiencing it. Simplicity has grown so fast, so quickly. Why? Because we're actually a non-profit owned by a charity.
Yeah. Well, it's as simple as people want to feel connected to other people, but also connected to an extent to the companies they're interacting with or the services within their life, right? And it brings me back to what you said earlier around the people who make the most money are not the people trying to make money. It's the people who are have the purpose.
Yeah.
And it's the same when you go, 15% going to charity. That sounds like a good idea.
Yeah.
And you knew, because you're a smart guy, you knew the implications to doing that and the business outcomes, but that's the right thing to do opposed to I'm going to do this for this reasons.
Yeah.
And then it creates
that's a great observation. I think the other thing too, and this is all sort of bound up in that too, is that, capitalism, time is not your friend in making money, right? Time is your enemy. You've got to make money quickly because you've got to repay shareholders and they get hungry. But if you run a non-profit, or let's call it a social enterprise, or if you have a business model where time is your friend, right? That is a massive competitive advantage as well. And by that I mean, and by the way, this is for most for-profit organizations as well. I see too many startups raise too much money too quickly and then feel obliged to spend it, grow quickly to pay back their shareholders, right? But if you ran a starvation mentality and said, no, we're only going to spend what we earn or we just raise a little bit of money and we don't have to win in the next 5 years. If you said we're playing the long game here, we just have to get a few things right and just execute well. And I think that we are in love with unicorns, speed, tech, all this competition is going to come in. No, it's not. No, it's not. If you make time your friend and you say we don't have to be successful in the next 3 or 4 years, and I know a lot of people think, oh, that's not going to bring the best out of people and you've got to create this sort of like dopamine-fueled environment. No. I in some cases I get that. And some, if you've got to make a movie in a certain period of time, you've all got to be jacked up to get it going. But most businesses make time their enemy, but time is actually their friend. And we say this all the time at Simplicity. We say, no, time is our friend. We are going to be here for 100 years. We can invest. We have a 100-year, strategic plan. We don't have to win now. We just have to. And so we have this phrase: you aim, and then you fire.
Yeah.
So I think that capitalism is changing, and I know it sounds a pretty dramatic statement.
Well, you can even see the shifts recently of what you sort of talked about before is capital as a strategy where I'm just going to throw as much money as I can at this business as quick as I can, and they will have the resources to just outdo everyone else, and they will end up failing. Like you look at the is it SoftBank? The funds that everyone they've thrown money at hasn't really worked that well.
Yeah, and I see it happen in New Zealand too. Businesses get too much money too quickly, right? And then they feel as if they have to do roll-ups.
Yeah.
Because what they do is, I understand the business strategy, grow as fast as we can to the point where a big company will want to acquire us, because if you just let us go, we'll start eating their lunch, right? So you see the Apples and the Microsofts and so on just buying any possible competitor, swallowing it, suppressing it. So I understand the business model to do that. But if you want to build an enduring business, you don't have to do that. You can wait. And, I see too many companies that are obsessed with the cap table, not obsessed with the cash flow. And so that's the first thing I say is forget about your cap table. Just obsess on how much, you guys know this, right? You've got to be paranoid about every dollar you spend. I mean, I noticed you were saying you're going down to Wellington, and I just thought, oh yeah, we got this car with Jetstar. And I was saying, damn right. It says, when I set this business up, I flew on Jetstar. And we flew on Jetstar until such time as we could afford to not, So, and even then, we turn right.
Yeah.
Every time.
Yeah.
So, it's time can be your friend.
Yeah. People
Yeah.
want to win in 6 months instead of decades, right?
Yeah.
Which brings me to the point. So simplicity is about, winning and building over the long term, not the short term. Fast forward 8 years and you've got, over $5 billion.
Almost 7 now. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
7.
It's
Okay,
going nuts.
7.
Yeah.
Can't forget that too,
James.
right?
Yeah.
Nearly $7 billion of
Yeah.
funds under management.
Yeah.
You mentioned around like doing well, having a great product in the market gives you the right to do things that, were not the initial plan or not where you started. What are the plans for simplicity moving forward?
Well, so 90% of our money is invested passively because overseas we don't have any competitive advantage. So we don't pretend that we do. I have no idea where the financial markets are going. So we'll just invest passively, charge the lowest fee. But in New Zealand, where we're having that much money and being a non-profit and a charity can get you a competitive differential, like a sustainable long-term competitive advantage, we'll do it. So we'll do it quietly. So you guys are involved in mortgages, for example. So we have a first home mortgage business, right? Started 5 years ago. It's probably done, I don't know, maybe 500 mortgages now. It's about $200 million book. But, we have a competitive advantage. We don't have to make a margin. So we can take a little bit of KiwiSaver money and we can lend it out to our members in the terms of first home mortgages. The banks have a 2% net interest margin. We charge 1% less than the market and we give 1% more back to our KiwiSaver members. You can only do that, as you grow. Like that's a 50-year plan. And so we did that. In housing, we were effectively gifted a major construction company. This is once again being a charity. Husband and wife team, Shane and Anna, very successful company. They decided to give back. So our money and their construction capacity led to Simplicity Living. We're now building a house every 1.8 days.
Yep.
So we want to get that up to 3 houses a day in affordable long-term rentals. And the economics of that are fantastic because we vertically integrate the whole thing. You can do that. It's a competitive advantage when you get given amazing people, amazing companies. And then in private equity, and that's a really good example. So we go to family companies in New Zealand now and we say, hey, listen, we'd just like to own 10 to 20% of you, maybe a little bit more sometimes. We would just want to own it forever. Don't want to sit on your board, don't want to tell you what to do.
Yep.
Just like a little old auntie writing out a check and saying, because we're going to be around forever and we believe in you and just carry on doing what you do.
Yeah. And
when you want to sell, that's fine. We'll obviously sell our shares with you, but our holding period is forever. Our ideal holding period is forever.
Yep.
So those are competitive advantages. And they're scalable. You can put a lot of money into all of those things over time, but it takes time. So that's, and who knows what we'll get into. Insurance, banking, food. I mean, basically anything where we think people are paying too much money, where the margin's too high, and where the bills you have to pay.
Yep.
The important things in life, right? So we have this 100-year cradle to the grave strategy that we will be involved in all of those things where people are paying too much. But I'll give you an example. We will probably never be in the health insurance business because Southern Cross are doing it just great.
Yeah.
Why would we bother?
Yeah.
They're fantastic. So we'll let them get on with it. Likewise, we would never do anything I think the AA did because they're a non-profit, charity. So, yeah, I mean, that's our long-term strategy, but, it's really long-term, mate.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's long.
Decades and decades.
Yeah.
But,
just from a business perspective, I'm interested, how do you because a lot of people, do one thing and then they focus and say, I'm going to go and do this other thing and this other thing. But because they don't have the core skill sets in the other areas, they fall over. There's lots of examples through history. How do you make those decisions at Simplicity going, which areas are good areas to focus on versus like the Southern Cross one going?
It's an easy one, but
no, I get it. So there's Jeff Bezos from Amazon has this great phrase, your margin is our opportunity, right? In fact, I was thinking of getting a big badge whenever I go to finance industry events or whatever. So
you should lean into it.
Yeah.
Exactly. So where there is margin we think is too high, So we spend a lot of time working out, are people getting ripped off, and what are the business models that mean that people are paying so much? And then we say, okay, can we, by virtue of putting lots of money in over a long period of time and not needing to make any money ourselves, can we disrupt that? And this takes months and sometimes years to work out. And then we say, okay, if we can do that, how will we do that? And inevitably, this revolves around amazing people. So if you look at Simplicity Living, it is an amazing team of people. Our mortgage business is an amazing team of 3 people. Our venture capital and private equity is an amazing team of 2 people. It's not many people, but they're amazing people. And then you let them get on with it, right? So you spend a lot of time analyzing the opportunity. You can see that it's scalable, it's sustainable, we can win. And then you just let people get on with it, right? And then they then borrow the brand name, and then they have the money by virtue of our members. And then in doing good and changing this sort of thing, then people talk about us. I mean, we're a very grassroots organisation. It's just word of mouth. Our marketing budget is like tiny compared with our competitors. I think our cost of acquisition is 1/10 of our competitors. So, and you just do it. It's like so many businesses think if I just tell the story that well, then people will believe me. It's almost like they're tricking people into doing it. But if you just do it, I mean, you guys know this, right? If you just do it, people will then talk about it, and that is the long way to win. But man, it's the certain way to win, right?
Yeah.
Because you're actually delivering something which is genuinely good value.
Yeah.
So I have no doubt Simplicity will be the biggest financial institution in New Zealand. And the reason I say that is not because of anything that I've done or whatever, but because if you get a non-profit model which charges a quarter or a third of the fees of your competitors, and you bring out products which are genuinely good value, and you actually just make people's lives better, you give them the money which gives them the choices and dignity in life. We call ourselves a dignity company. You will win, but you just, maybe not in your lifetime. It's just going to take time, right? So, because people are smart, the finance industry thrives on apathy and ignorance.
Yeah.
That's why these big bank billboards don't have facts and figures. They have happy families jumping into swimming pools, right? Yeah. They're basically the subliminal messages. Money is difficult and hard. Just give it to us.
Let's keep it opaque.
Yeah. So, but if you have a truthful quality delivery, then you will win. As long as you don't need a huge amount of shareholder capital.
Yeah.
Then you've got to feed your shareholders, right?
Yeah. The happy family jumping into the swimming pool. That's a good one.
Yeah.
I do want to ask a question about there's a hardcore passive investing community that would argue that Simplicity is not a passive Kiwi saver anymore just because you're doing too much, right? Would you agree with that?
No, we're mostly passive. I mean, in fact, we are all passive. Let me ask you this. A lot of people confuse passive with being that you don't make any decisions, right? But so, for example, if I have 90% of our money is in the traditional passive, so it's only 10% we're talking about that we do other stuff with. It might be more over time, but it's still a small amount. But let's use, for example, housing. So say, you're an active manager in housing. Look, if you build and own and rent, with our aspirations, 10,000 houses all around the country, that's a passive portfolio, right? You may have actively built these houses, but our intention is that we will have these large businesses that are not making big bets or anything. They're just doing what I call getting close to the cash, right? So we want to own businesses and assets where it is the last bill you won't pay, right? Because if you also think about, over 100 years, we're going to go through, I don't know, 1 or 2 or 3 depressions, recessions, market blow-ups or whatever. I want our members to own assets where you're still paying the rent, you're still paying the power bill, you're still paying the insurance or whatever. You get close to those big decisions. And if we have a competitive business, so that's a very passive mindset, actually. It just happens that you have to be a little bit active to acquire those passive assets. So I think we're 100% passive myself. Even in private equity, when we're buying these family stakes, if you have 100 of these companies, it's a pretty passive portfolio. Any one of them can go wrong, right? So I think people confuse active and passive. I think that the true intention of passive is that you don't have to worry about any one of these things that goes wrong. So we'll have a very diversified, hugely diversified portfolio of assets, none of which we have to get actively involved in, actually. They just run themselves.
What about the other thing I'm interested in is, so there's a lot of property developers in a lot of pain at the moment who are having to discount stock substantially and essentially move on. It looks like, and you'll know a lot more about this than I will, it looks like it's cheaper to buy a lot of this stock potentially than build it in some instances. Does Simplicity go, there's a lot of new build stock out there in the market. Do you guys think about buying all of that?
Look, we get offered it all the time. It fails on two fronts. Most of it we can, in fact, in all instances, we can still build cheaper than buying it. So it hasn't discounted enough yet for that. But secondly, the build quality is often terrible. You know, the building regs in New Zealand mean you have to build a house to last 50 years. If it fell down on the 51st year, you'll get a code compliance on year one. It's insane. So we build our stuff to last 3 times as long as that, and arguably more. So we don't like the quality of it, and we certainly don't like the price. So I hear. I mean, the building industry, it's crazy, isn't it? This country that has so much land, so many resources, so many builders cannot build cheaply. So we have a system which over the decades has developed into this high margin, bespoke industry where everybody was making money as long as house prices rose, right? Rising house prices papers over a lot of flaws in business models, right? If your assets keep on going, everyone looks like a hero, right? In a rising industry. What we've now had is tides going out. So you're seeing who's swimming naked, right? And it is, and so what we now need, and by the way, in doing that, we also built too few houses. And a lot of that's got to do with successive governments who never restarted the state housing scheme. And, the last government who sort of failed with Kiwi Build. So we have to build a lot more houses, but also got to build a lot more of the same houses. Like in New Zealand, like when we go along to architects, they go, oh, your houses, they're so cookie cutter. Yeah, that's the whole idea, right? We're running a manufacturing process here. The output happens to be houses, but we're building them like Toyotas, constant improvement. Yeah, you want them to look the same. That's how they get to be affordable. If you want it to look the way you want, your tiles, your sink, your taps, expect that to cost an awful lot of money.
Yeah. I heard Chris Bishop get challenged by somebody in the media about that as well, saying like, you're going to have all these like 1-bedroom places everywhere and they're all going to look same and not to be standard. And he goes, well, it's a hell of a lot better than everybody living in tents and in motels, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And you look at New Zealand's history. When we built state houses, right? When you say now, I've just bought an old state house, they go, oh, that's good, because they know it's solid and built. But
and it's still standing.
Still standing. And most of our state houses were built to 3 designs. Yeah. Single bay villa, double bay villa. Like you can
pick them a
recognize them instantly, right? They all look the same.
Yeah.
So we've got to get back to mass manufacturing of houses. They were building tens of thousands a year in the state housing boom of the 1930s. It is possible for us to do this. And KiwiSaver is one of those things which will open that up now, because it'll provide the sort of money needed to build in the scale. When our building program's going full throttle in a few years, we'll be spending $10 million a week on construction.
Yeah.
It's a lot of wonga, right? So, you need to have institutional money to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Sam, I'm going to stop you there because we're going to do another episode with you, which is going to be really interesting where we jump into the 100. Because the big thing I'm learning with Simplicity is its simplicity and the purpose around New Zealand and the impact on New Zealand, making New Zealand a better place. I'm going to talk a lot more about property. I think is probably quite interesting. I'm keen to pick your mind a lot more about KiwiSaver going forward and the 100-year plan. So thank you very much for sharing your story, which is very much interlinked with Simplicity as well. Just a guy from the mean streets of
Sunnyvale, yeah.
And it's an interesting. It's great for your business too and your industry too, right?
Yeah,
because there's going to be a whole lot of New Zealanders that have a whole lot of money outside of their houses, and they need help.
Yeah,
awesome.
They need advice.
Okay. All right. Well, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you see the next episode with Sam. Much love to Partners Life for sponsoring the episode. Please subscribe, review, and like, and we'll catch you next time.
Cheers.